find a little opportunity on gold. And I think that we
Love
got
that.
some nice setups cooking this week. How about yourself?
Let's go. Hey, me too, man. Caught a nice little US 30 play. So it was good here. Almost set. All right. Let's get- All right, cool. We're good to go. What's going on? All right, Zachary, man, I'm hyped to have you. I think it's a treat for maybe more for me than for even the students that are here with me. So I get super stoked to have you on here. But yeah, I know today you had a good trading day so far. Got a nice little spot with gold. And I hit you up yesterday, because one, we're masterminding some things for the convention, right, in Croatia. And I hadn't had a guest on here for I think a couple of months. So I know a lot of people here that have been plugging in every Monday. We actually got in a routine of having special guests on. We had you on a couple times. And then I kind of just transparently, I just got lazy and I just stopped scheduling people. And I just started doing my own trainings for a while. But people, man, the demand was absurd. So I'm like, I'm for the people. I'm for the people. And so and so this is my excuse to have you on here, just so I get to hear you say drop a lot of wisdom. And it's totally for everyone else, but I'm definitely stoked. And you know, I spent some time thinking about my trading journey and what it looked like to the whole sequence, and like kind of what would it have looked like if I didn't have any mentorship? What would it have looked like if it would have been if I would have been just by myself and doing this? And when would I have decided to go through certain strategies and when not to? And so I was curious, and what I wanted to do is I want to actually have a conversation with you about it. Is what like I guess we'll start here. And before I go into it, I just assume everyone knows who Zachary is, just because I am used to it. But I want to make sure people do have a good perspective, right, on what you've done and who you are in this space. So, guys, if you're not familiar with Zachary Hogan, this is one of my close friends, someone that I admire, not just for his skill set and his value, but for someone who's just a good fucking person, like just a good human being with the best intentions, is always ready to serve. And it's someone who I've seen really evolve as a person, as a trader, which, those go hand in hand. And someone who I think just approaches the game in a very long-term mindset and with a very, very stoic mindset. And those are two really rare characteristics. And so I want to make sure that you guys understand this is someone who's got, I think, nearing 10 years in the game. I might be a little bit, I might be a year off, but yeah, a lot more experience. He's been trading longer than I have. And so something that, at this point in time, I think just lasting in this game for in itself, it says it was a massive testament. And so, guys, you are in for a special treat because my goal is going to be to kind of like reverse engineer and like deconstruct the mind of Zachary Hogan and share some good thoughts on what moments do we shift strategies and at what moments do you make changes, do you continue the same path? So yeah, guys, welcome. And Zachary, bro, thank you for your time.
Hey, I'm grateful to be here, Mike. And, I always enjoy our collabs. I feel like they're always incredibly valuable, not just for our growth, because just like you, I'm able to learn through observation from things that you do, from things that you train on. And I think that's one of the benefits of the proximity that we have. And even with you running these trainings by yourself, I mean, you got so much value. So, you know, it's definitely my pleasure to be
Hey,
here, though.
are you trying to sweet talk me right now? Because it's working.
Well, we can, I'll buy you a girly drink.
All right. Okay. I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm
but
looking
but
forward
on
to
a
it.
on a real note, it's my pleasure to be here. I always love being able to have these conversations because I mean for a number of reasons, but really the biggest one is I remember what it was like when I first got started on this journey. And now that I've kind of crossed into that 10-year mark, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges, and even some major setbacks that when I think back, they could have been those make or break points for me to determine whether or
Mhm.
not I was even going to continue on this path. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I'm here today. And what's really profound is that from a lot of the people that I have the opportunity to connect with, I mean, we got a lot of people that are here on the call tonight. I'm grateful for each and every single one of you that are here, that are tapped in, that are open minded to growth. And this community, it's really shown me what's possible. Because if I were to look back, had I had known what I was going to experience from the time where I was just kind of throwing money at the markets, hoping that something was going to stick, to developing a system that worked for me. Because you see a lot of strategies online, there are a lot of different ways of trading inside of the markets. And I'm going to go as far as saying you can make all of them work. It's
Yeah.
just, are you going to be able to make them work consistently over an extended period of time and have that be a duplicatable system that works for
Mhm.
you? There's a
For sure.
very big difference there. So if I could go back and if I knew what I know now, I would have approached this entirely differently. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
kind of unpack some of the things that I've experienced. And I'm sure that there's going to be some overlap there between my journey, your journey, as well as those of you that are here tonight. You may be in a certain phase of your development that I've been through or that Mike has been through. And that's a beautiful thing about having these kind of trainings and having these kind of conversations. It's that even if you're just coming into this with the intention of having an open mind and seeing if you can take just one thing out of this conversation, that in itself does have the power to shift your paradigm and allow you to go to that next level.
100%. 100%. I've had moments. I've been to, paid events. I know you go and you pay for personal development and just be around the right people. And sometimes a lot of it is things you've heard, but you're different in that moment. So it's like, oh, it connects differently now. Or 3 days of value you paid, hundreds or thousands of dollars to be
Mm-hmm.
there. And it's like one sentence and you're like, this is what I came for.
That was
Uh,
it.
yep. So yeah, to really kick it off, I was I was really reflecting on my process and risk management process, my entry strategy process, my exit strategy, and how like it's hilarious how far away I am to where I started on how I approach things. And I was looking back at over some of the more, and I realized every kind of stage there was a point, and I might have just had more ego, or I thought I was smarter than I really am. But at every moment, I kind of thought I had figured it out, and I was like, "Oh, cool, this is it. I got it finally." And then this is
Mm-hmm.
gonna be it. Uh, and so that bit me in the ass, obviously every time. But how much did you have to suffer in terms of whether it's losing psychologically or money wise for you to realize kind of like, okay, maybe what I'm doing is not right? Like, was that hard for you to kind of change your ways, or were you almost really willing to kind of shift?
Yeah, I mean, it was a number of things. So just to kind of paint the picture and give some context, especially for those of you that maybe aren't too familiar with who I am, and if you haven't had the opportunity to hear some of my story, when I first got started back in 2013, trading, it was a thing. There were a lot of people trading, a lot of people making money, but it wasn't talked about in the way that it is now. It wasn't something that you go on every social media app and you see people dancing and like, talking about forex, talking about crypto. It just wasn't the
Yeah,
same.
social media was really like elementary. It was like,
Yeah, it, it's kind of crazy to think how things have evolved, but when I think back on what things looked like when I first got started, I came into this industry with the mentality of this is it. This is what I've been looking for. because I was painted this vision that I could put my money to work, and
Mhm.
I was going to be able to basically go from where I was at, which was kind of transitioning between dropping out of college, just kind of bouncing around, part-time job, like doing what I needed to do, but not really having that direction. So when I found trading and when I looked at the markets for the first time, I had that feeling of, I don't even know what this is, but this is it.
This is it.
So
No, I had the same thing.
in the beginning,
It's almost like how dare we like just have that like, oh yeah, this is it.
well, yeah, and
You know?
it frustrated me a little bit because I had gone through up until that point basically 20 years of life without ever being introduced to the markets. I didn't have any close friends that were
Mhm.
trading or that were investing.
Right.
No one in my family openly talked about the markets. So it was just one of those things where it's like I spent all of this time in school, I have all of these relationships, and why am I just now hearing about this?
Yeah. I felt like I had uncovered like a secret. Like I felt, you know what I mean? Like it felt like, yo,
Yeah.
I'm on the inside now. Like, yo, this is the Matrix. I just found the little bunny. Like, oh, okay, well, what's going on? You know?
Oh, 100%. It's kind of like that moment where, and I'll kind of come back to this a little bit later on, but it's like that moment where when I first found Bitcoin and it was like 2015, but I was so focused on other things that I just overlooked it. And
Yeah.
so it was just like, anyways, to bring it back to the beginning, the first 2 years of my process, to summarize, looked like this. I was trading binary options. That was my introduction. So for
First
those of you
two
that
years. Right?
first 2 years,
Okay.
trading binary options. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it is a time-based trading style. And inherently, your reward to risk is negative. Like there's no 1-to-1s, 1-to-2s, 1-to-3s. I'm talking for every dollar you're risking, you're making 50 to 70 cents. So just to give you perspective,
And you did this for 2 years.
2 years. And the challenge during that time was that I didn't really have guidance. There was things online, and sure, I was putting money into the markets. I believed that I needed to get hands-on exposure with real money in the markets. I didn't see the value back then in demo trading,
Yeah.
and it definitely has its purpose. In my opinion, nothing is ever going to match the hands-on experience of having your capital working for you in the markets. Whether you win or whether you lose, that experience is priceless.
Yeah.
But
I think like I do obviously live trading is the most valuable experience. The difference is can you withstand a
well,
price?
and that's just it. Here I am, dropped out of college, working a part-time job. I didn't like, thankfully at that time, I didn't have too many other responsibilities. I
Mhm.
contributed towards food at home and I was living with my parents, like there really wasn't all that much on my plate. So I had the opportunity, but when I look back, more than the accounts that I blew was the time that was
Mhm.
spent in that phase, because it wasn't until almost my third year in where I even got introduced to the forex markets. And so it's
Mhm.
like, here I am for 2 years trading a derivative of the foreign
Yeah.
exchange market, not being able to have any sort of ideal risk management or ideal risk to reward. And so I was putting in all of this time and all of this effort, even to the point where the first strategy that I used, it was a combination of Bollinger Bands. And so for those of you that don't know what that is, it's just basically a series of moving averages. And it was a 2-minute scalping strategy. So you would wait for the price to go outside
What
of the
have you done?
bands, and
Sorry.
then you would basically try to scalp it and like take it back in. It was ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I committed this time and this effort into studying this retail textbook
Mhm.
that was presented to me. And so while I was excited and while I had the vision it was possible, it just wasn't working.
Yeah. So, all right, there's a couple of things. So you went like 2 to 3 years trading a negative risk reward or a sub one risk reward. Um, there was just like, and this is no mentorship, right? You're kind of just reading books and just kind of doing your own thing. Okay.
In a lot of just independent study, paying a couple $100 here and there for
Yeah.
mentors that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Isn't it funny looking back now and you're like, oh wow, the audacity. Like, so
I mean, it's funny looking back at the fact that at that time when I first made the decision to invest in mentorship, I'd been trading for around a year, and the person that I invested into had been trading for about 6 months. So, it's like there just wasn't the right perspective. But when I
crazy.
looked at the results, it was one of those things where it's like, well, they
Mhm.
must know something that I don't.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I get that perspective. So I wanna unpack a couple of things so far with it. It's easy to kind of overlook these things, but going 2 to 3 years, and I think you said you didn't really trade demo, so you were just paying for lessons through the market,
Yep.
and but you said that there wasn't too much pressure because you lived at home, you contributed to the family, but you didn't really have any expenses. Now, was that something that you kind of like did intentionally where you're like, I'm gonna be here, limit my expenses until I'm like at a good spot? Or was it like, did you have temptations to like, oh, let me go get my own spot here with my friends, do this and that? Or was it more so like you kind of your sacrifice was kind of on the next level of freedom for yourself, and then you just were like, okay, let me fiscally be responsible until I figure this out.
Yeah, it was a combination of both. And even from what is being said in the chat about did your parents ever put pressure on you? It was a combination of me being grateful that I had that flexibility. And in the beginning, my parents, they were supportive. They looked at it from the perspective of, you know what, if you're going to put your mind to this and if you're going to do it,
Yeah.
then that's great. But as I continued through that process going into, year two, and it just wasn't working, I had to start recognizing that I needed to make changes, because that was when I started to feel the pressure. I was starting to feel not only the self-doubt of,
Yeah.
man, I've invested the last 2 years of my life into this. I feel like I'm going backwards. And at the same time, my parents starting to have that conversation of, well, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah.
Not quite like that, but you know how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
So
uh there's this one other thing you could be doing.
yeah, I think the one that just always comes into my mind, my stepdad, he still to this day, he works at Canadian National Rail, their largest railroad company in Canada. They've got great pension. They've got like a stock program where every paycheck, they're matching you. But great compensation. My brother works there as well. Like it's a good company to work for people that are looking for security in that kind of a sense.
Mhm.
But
Really.
when we were talking about, there's this other thing. It's like that was the thing. They're like, well, why don't you try to do this? And there was even a point where I went and I interviewed just to kind of like appease them. But thankfully it didn't get accepted. But anyway, to bring it back, the the pressure, it was the combination of the pressure I was putting on myself, but then also, okay, like what am I actually going to be doing? And I realized that it didn't matter how much I talked about it, I had to actually start to make change.
Okay.
So I'm a huge gamer. I mean, still to this day, I love video games. That was one of the reasons why the markets appealed to me.
Mhm.
And back then, my days consisted of working, sleeping, minimal family time, studying, and or gaming. Like that was
Yeah.
my life. And so what I decided to do was I sold my Xbox, I sold my TV. I really made a
Oh, wow.
pivotal decision
Yeah.
to get rid of all distractions and to just go all in to learning how to trade and actually understanding the markets
And to
because
get
I'd already
on,
invested 2 years up until that point
yeah. And I
and
feel
it wasn't working. So something had to change. And
yeah.
that decision, I don't even believe it was the fact that I got rid of the Xbox as much as it was just the decision that this is what I'm going to do. I can always buy another one later, but I've got to commit to this right now. And I changed my perspective to think of it as if I was willing to go to college for 4 years to get a degree. I'm
Mhm.
halfway through that journey
Yeah, I
within
think
this
that's a
trading
good,
development process.
absolutely.
What's going to happen if I
Gaming,
commit
right?
myself for the next 2 years?
You were competitively gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that sacrifice was it was much more than just like, oh, like, all right, I'll just stop playing Call of Duty. It was like, this is a passion. This is
Oh,
something
yeah.
that I'm one of the best at, and I'm gonna walk away from a different type of, greatness, a different type of passion to get freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of like, I feel like a ceremonial kind of sacrifice in a way, it's like, all right, like to the people around you, it's like, oh, okay, this is serious.
Yeah,
I think,
and that was it. It was me deciding I'm gonna make the change.
yeah,
I'm not just gonna talk about it anymore. I'm not just gonna try to explain what it is that I'm doing. I'm actually going to show my friends, I'm gonna show my parents, I'm gonna show everybody, I'm gonna show myself that I can
yeah.
do this. And it started there. Like that was really the beginning of the journey of me developing and discovering the strategy that worked for me, taking my education to the next level. That was the turning point. And that ties in with that whole idea of there's a day that you signed up, but there's a day you actually got started.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they join, they have access to all of these tools and all these resources, but they're not really doing anything. Like they think that
Mhm.
they're doing things and they think that they're doing productive, but they're really not doing the
Yeah,
most effective things.
that's a tough pill to swallow, man. Like I've bought courses on things to make myself feel like I'm doing something. And
Mhm.
then, for example, I bought a funnels course like, I don't know, almost a year ago at like a couple grand. I was stoked, beyond excited. I haven't even started it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even start it. And we do that a lot with whether it's videos. It's like, because it feels like you're taking a step forward, and I invested like into myself. That's the step
Yeah.
forward. But that's the easiest step forward because it doesn't require any work. You know, it's like so okay. And this, for those of you guys here, like I'm asking Zachary part of his process because there's a lot of intention. One, I know how intentional you are, but two, there's a lot of things that we learn through the changes that we make. And so there's moments where you either make a change out of frustration or you make it and it's good or it's actually not good. And so going into margin trading with forex, okay, immediately it opens up risk reward, right? Immediately, it's just a completely different approach, in which we both favor way more.
Mhm.
So, okay, cool. So you switch things up, and obviously it makes a lot more sense. What kind of technical strategy were you using? Staying similar like Bollinger Band approach, like right when you started?
So I started there. I started with the Bollinger Bands, moving averages. I wanted to see if, yeah, I wanted to see if there's a way where I could translate it
Okay.
because I had already invested so much time into learning that particular technique.
Uh-huh.
And so I started adjusting the variables a little bit. Eventually, I dropped the Bollinger Bands for quite some time. In fact, even up until the point where I started teaching here at the academy, obviously there was a lot of change and a lot of progress that happened
Mhm.
between then and when I was brought onto the platform. But with this individual I was working with, his name is Eddie. We had a lot of great conversations, and he was showing me different ways that I could tweak the variables and start looking at the markets as if I was a big player. So I
Mhm.
found that the more that I took off of the charts, so like getting rid of the Bollinger Bands, getting rid of some of the moving averages, getting rid of the RSI, and just simplifying it, the more I started to understand. And so
Mhm.
between that time where I was transitioning into learning margin trading and developing some sort of duplicatable approach that I could use in this new realm of the
Mhm.
markets, what I decided to do was I just dropped it down to two moving averages. So this was my strategy. I had a 200 EMA and I had a 50 EMA. The
Okay, I
200
think I
EMA, I
familiar.
used that solely for the daily time frame. And what I would do is I look to see how much space there was between that 200 daily moving average and where the current price action was. So if it was super close, it's like, okay, this is kind of like a ranging market. Maybe we're kind of consolidating. If it was super far, that would start to either give me a clue of maybe we're
Virtual.
going here, or maybe we're going to start looking for a reversal.
Okay.
The 50 EMA I was more or less using for like an entry technique. And as I look back on how I
Do the
used
same
it
thing.
then,
I'm just like, I literally did this strategy too.
well,
Um,
it's funny though, because how I used it then and how I use it now, or how I would use it now if I did still use it, it's
yeah.
kind of like when you're getting that sweep on liquidity. And it's like I have that
Yeah.
technical understanding now that even though I had these indicators on my chart that were being used in a specific type of way, whether they're on my chart physically or not, they're still there. There are
Mhm.
still traders that are using those in their decision making process. So at the end of the day, one of the things that I love to do now is like draw a fib after it's like, oh yeah, there's probably like a 61.8 right here. Boom, boom, draw the fib. There it is. Like it's that repetition of just seeing it over and over and over. But that's where I started, was the 200 and the 50 EMA.
wanna I wanna go over something that you said, after a couple of years of trading with one approach, you had put so much time, you had put so much energy into one thing. And I think this is called the sunken cost fallacy,
Mm-hmm.
where because you're like, hey, I've done this for this long, like I have to keep doing this. Same thing with relationships, right? I've been with him, I've been with her for 3 years. Like all of that went to waste. If we, if I give it up, if it ends, was this all the waste? And so the reason that's a fallacy is because if it no longer serves you, then every second that you keep doing the same thing, that's really what's wasteful, right? That's what's no longer of value to you. And
Yep.
so, for everyone here, you might be kind of married to a strategy, an approach, belief, and expectation. And just because you thought a certain way or done something a certain way for so long, don't let yourself be attached to that. And so I think that's just a gem right there in itself, that it's like, okay, I need to be willing to let this go if clearly this is not something that's serving me. So yeah, I thought that was something that is, I feel like you did, whether it was like super intentional or not, but like, there's a lot that just to let go. It
Yeah.
takes conscious energy to do that.
Oh, it,
All right,
it definitely
cool.
does. It definitely does. And I mean, that's something that the easiest way for me to let go was just taking it off the chart. And I mean, it took me about a year to understand that it's still there, whether I'm using it or not. Like I
Yeah.
didn't have the mental framework or the level of understanding from just like a fundamental, this is how trading works,
Mhm.
to realize even if I'm not using the moving average, well, someone else is, and this is why. So that took time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So okay. So at this point, how long did it take you to move past only finding an entry strategy? Because that's what I realized like a couple of years back. I was like, I'm only focused on getting in. like I have no strategy outside of getting into the market. Like I don't have a risk management strategy. I don't know when
Mhm.
I'm moving my stop loss. I don't even know where my stop loss is supposed to go. When should I be getting out? Should it be the same all the time? Should it be different? Like when did you kind of start to expand beyond just entries and then started to get a little bit more specific on when you get out or in just like different lanes?
Yeah. I mean, 2017 was my breakthrough year. So that
Okay.
was going into my fourth year at that point in time. And, you know, there was a lot of things that I was able to take away from that year. But I think the biggest was just having the accountability and with the people that I was around and, you know, thankfully still around most of them today. But in that year, that was literally when I had that aha moment of I've got to move away from putting so much emphasis on trying to get the best entry because there were times, and I mean this still happens. I look at it differently now than I did back then. And for those of you that are here with us right now, you've probably had one or two of these moments where you could get such a precise level to where the market would come down and then the data like it wicks it, but you don't get filled because the spread was like just a little bit too great. But it was like, man, that was the best possible point, and the market just turned just like that.
Oh yeah.
So I had to move away from being so focused on trying to get the best entry.
Okay.
And I had to become comfortable with taking drawdown as
Okay.
I moved into that fourth
I
year.
don't know what that is, but okay.
Well, you know, it's the reason why I say this is because, and I kind of gotta deviate and bring it to where we are today. The reality is there are a lot of people that have the expectation that you're going to be able to frame a trade that looks good on paper. It looks
Yeah.
good when you're using the risk to reward tool. You got a 2 pip stop loss and a 50 pip TP. It's like, yo, this is going to be a lit trade. But it's like, yeah, actually, the spread is like 1.8 pips. So are you even using a stop loss at that point? It's going to come down to your entry and you're taking out.
Yeah.
So it's like just understanding that. I spent a lot of time in my fourth year really just playing with risk to reward specifically. And I was working with 1 to 2s then. Now I'm working, you know, as 1 to 3 as like a base, got to be absolute minimum. But
Yeah.
the 1 to 2s, that was even just a big leap in itself away from
Okay.
negative reward to risk. You
Yeah.
know, like it
I was
went from
wondering
negative
how
reward to risk to 1 to 1s to 1 to 2s.
I feel like I was curious on how that sequence was for you because I think one of the most common things I see now, it's like either you don't even know anything, like risk to reward just isn't a thing. Like it's just not something you've been exposed to yet, or you understand it and then you're like, cool, I'm only gonna go for 10 to 1s, and it's like, and then you have the the real expectations of social media where people are doing 25 to 1s blindfolded, which obviously guys, I'm being really sarcastic. So now I see it a lot now where it's like the expectations are pretty crazy. And so I was curious to see what your sequence was. And so did you kind of push, okay, 1 to 1s, 2 to 1s, you know, with time, things are working out, back testing. All right, let me stretch myself to 3 to 1s. What was that like?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on 1 to 2s. Year 4, 5, 6 was mostly 1 to 2s. And I mean, at that point, my results were improving dramatically.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because just because I was framing it with a 1 to 2 as like that minimum threshold, where it's like, unless the setup could produce at least this, I'm not even going to consider it. That
Mhm.
didn't mean that that was where I was getting out of my position. All right. So there was still a lot of time invested into understanding targets. And as I
Yeah.
learned more about imbalances and as I learned more about liquidity, and as I just started connecting the dots with all these things that I'm aware of now, it helped me align my expectations for what the market was going to be able to give me. In the
Mhm.
beginning, I thought the market owed me something.
Yeah.
2 years of time, you owe me for that time.
Ooh,
you
that's a
gotta give
slippery
me
slope right
the
there.
money, and
Yeah.
shifting the paradigm to just understanding the market doesn't know me shit.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've invested this time and I've gained some knowledge and my results are improving. But at the end of the day, the market doesn't care if I win. It doesn't care if I lose. It doesn't care what I know or what I think I know. The reality is, every single day, I've got to come in and I've got to approach the charts with a plan. And if I don't have a plan, things are going to go wrong.
Mhm.
So it was a gradual transition. And back in 2019 going to 2020, that was when I really decided to just up it, go to the 1 to 3s, because my understanding of how everything connected with one another was just, again, continuing to improve. And it wasn't just theory. I was seeing it in my results. I was seeing it in my withdrawals. I was seeing
Yeah.
the proof. So
Yeah.
it's like, let me just, again, continue to tweak, continue to change, how to let go of some things, how to add some things.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the thing that made the biggest difference for me was just my expectation, not just on myself, but my expectations of what my relationship with the markets meant.
Did you underestimate your risk to reward capabilities? Like, was it a matter of like, let me just make sure I collect what I came here for? And did you have to kind of like almost expand your belief system on your risk reward potential? Or was it just, if I know it's possible, let me just collect enough data until I want to actually move on to the next, my next level of profitability? Because
Mm-hmm.
you and I both know, someone can be more profitable with 2 to 1s than someone else with 4 to 1s,
Yeah.
depending on win rate. So yeah,
Yeah.
what was that like for you?
I love that you asked me this, because this is something that I actually had a really great conversation with V. For those of you that know V for Valentino, amazing person, amazing educator. And he had asked me a similar question a couple of years ago, and it kind of gave us both a breakthrough moment. It was one of those things where it's like I was
Love it.
working through it, but I
Yeah,
hadn't
that's it.
quite discovered what I was looking for. And so when he asked me that, I refer to it as the glass ceiling. It's like when you're creating results, and some of you may be here right now, you have the confidence in yourself to where you can achieve a certain result. Maybe that's funding an account and getting to a certain account balance, right? Taking 3 figures to 4 figures, or 4 figures to five, or whatever that looks like for you. And every single time that you get to that level, it starts to get a little uncomfortable. You start to make mistakes. You have such a difficult time breaking through that. And so
Mhm.
it's like when the chart is uptrending and it hits that level, and then it bounces back. And then you hit it again and it bounces back. That was the story of my life for, for about a year, when I was transitioning through that whole understanding of what risk to reward even meant and my expectations of it. And I was vastly underestimating my
Mm.
risk to reward
Okay.
potential and the possibilities. It's like I knew what was possible.
Yeah.
I had done some incredible things up until that point. I had seen things that, I mean, just expanded my paradigm beyond anything that I was even capable of believing back then.
Mhm.
But this glass ceiling effect, it was a challenge that I really had to work with. And it wasn't until I was actually able to sit down and have an honest conversation about, this is where I am, this is where I know it could be,
Mhm.
what's holding me back?
Mhm.
And it was a core belief that I discovered that was
Right.
holding me back. And I think that we've talked about this, both in private, but also in conversations like this. And the belief that I discovered when I was willing to have this conversation with myself was that at a core level, I didn't believe that I was worthy of
Mhm.
making money from the markets. And I had to really sit down and reflect on that. And so
Yeah.
when I took a look back, it wasn't just what my experience with trading had been. It was everything that I knew and everything that I've been conditioned to believe since the time that I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into the world, living in a environment where my mom, thankfully she had the opportunity to be at home with me, my brother. She was raising the kids. My dad, one income family. He'd be gone out of the house before I woke up. And sometimes he'd be sitting down eating dinner before he would even come in. And so it's like working really, really hard, working really, really long hours to be
Yeah.
able to go and create income and to provide. And when I thought about everything and how that all connected, the things I had learned in school, the things I had observed with my friends, it was just this big aha moment of like, man, when I really think about it, what makes me deserve being able to make X amount of money? It doesn't even matter what the dollar number is.
Yeah.
By sitting here in the comfort of my own home and pressing a button. It's like, yeah, I'm doing some analysis and yeah, I'm studying whatever, but like realistically speaking, it's not hard to click buy. It's not
Right.
hard to click sell. You could flip a coin and not even know anything about what you're doing, and you could still make money. So it's like I really had to have that aha moment.
Mhm.
And once I realized that, I was able to start working through it and let it go. And once I did that was when I was able to go to the next level.
Mhm. Wow, that's amazing, man. I know we talked about this, but I think hearing it again, I know it relates, and a lot of people here probably can relate to that. And I feel like maybe it wasn't helpful at first in terms of reward, because it's almost like it should be harder, or can I even believe the fact that they could be more? But at the same time, do you think that some of those, like seeing the work that was required by your family to make income, do you think that's also a reason why you have been able to keep your trading accounts when you have, was that a reason that maybe you almost respect the money and the freedom and the responsibilities that come with it more because it's like this shit is earned, like
Mm-hmm.
now it's like, oh, this is work, mental
Yeah.
work. So do you think that also helps the fact that it's like you kind of respect what the alternative is?
Oh, 100%. You've got to have a good relationship with money if you're going to be successful in the markets. Like, you can't come into this with a disrespect for money and a disrespect for what you have in your account balance, regardless of how big or how small you might think it is. Because the
Mhm.
reality is, for you to be able to go from where you are right now to that next level, right now it might look like 500 pips. And then it becomes 250, and then it becomes 100. And then you're making what you would have made in 500 by catching 50. Like,
Mhm.
you have to really have a good relationship with
Yeah.
your money, because when you think about it, it's what's going to work for you
Mhm.
when you're in the markets. So it's one of those things that, if I were to be able to go back, like if I could jump in a time chamber and go back, it wasn't so much that I didn't have a good relationship with money as much as it was, again, the belief system about what I deserved and what was possible in my life. Had I
Yeah.
realized that much earlier, I do believe that it would have changed what this entire process for me would have looked like. But I had to still be willing to have the conversation to even come to that level of awareness. And
Mhm.
mind you, this was years in. I
Yeah,
was
yeah, for sure.
already starting to see profitability and I was already starting to make withdrawals. I had got out of my drawdown phase. I
Yeah.
got beyond break even before I even had this realization. But
Mhm.
again, it was that understanding that I can continue doing the same thing and I'm going to hit that level again and again and again. But if I want to go through that, I've got to, something isn't working.
For sure.
My technical analysis was improving. My risk to reward was improving. Everything was moving in the right direction. So I had to go within.
Mhm.
And that realization was just what allowed me to go to that next level. And it's a never ending process though. Like, that's the thing. what made me uncomfortable back then doesn't make me uncomfortable now. But
Something else
as I
does.
continue to hit new levels, and as the TPs get bigger, as the risk gets bigger, bigger relative to account balance and net
Yeah.
worth, and just looking at it differently,
Mhm.
there are still things that, of course, make me uncomfortable.
For sure.
But you got to work through that.
Yeah.
And as long as you're approaching it strategically, it doesn't matter if you win or if you lose because it all averages out.
Yeah. And I want to point this out, you got to a point where your technicals were, you know, and good enough, right? Just we'll put it like that, right? They were great. And even at that point, looking back, it's you realized it had nothing to the chart work. It was way beyond the chart work at some point. And someone asked, how do you come to the realization? Like, how do you realize what it is that's holding you back? And I think that's kind of the moment where it doesn't have to be formal meditation, but meditation is really you just kind of realizing what's on your mind, right? What's on your mind, and then what questions do you need to be asking yourself.
Yeah.
And so, at that point where, for example, in your case, it was risk reward, just this one scenario. It was like, all right, you had to ask yourself enough questions until you realized, okay, here's kind of the blockage, right? Here's the where there's lack and there should only be abundance. So it's like, okay, here's where I gotta flip that. And where does it come from? What's the root of it? So that's amazing. To segue out of risk reward process, and because there's like so many different parts of so many components of a trading system. At what point was it where you made like, yeah, I'm gonna go back to kind of like your philosophy on the market as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a steady transition from certain indicators, certain entry models, and then was it that you just started using more so naked trading, price action, and then eventually exposure to kind of smart money, just who's in charge, like the incentivization of the markets, or was it like technicals, hard technicals, and then like how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, it started just with purely technicals. And then as I started reading more and as I started studying more and being a little bit more intentional with looking for the why behind certain things, like, well, why do we use candlesticks? What are candlesticks? Why are there wicks? Just like asking these questions that most people,
Yeah.
at least that I've seen, don't
Mhm.
ask. And as I was discovering the answers to these, back then I wouldn't label it as smart money, but obviously it's like this whole
That's,
umbrella now.
yeah,
But
that's like
it,
not everything needs a category, but to simplify things, like we're just gonna call it that, so you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, and it's exactly that. So it started purely technical, then it transitioned into looking for the deeper meaning, the why. But really the thing that made the biggest difference, and this is for like for you, like for the individual that is here right now, if you take away anything from this tonight, I want it to be this, because you mentioned my philosophy on trading.
Yeah.
And there were two things that just they changed my life. They changed the way that I thought about money, the markets, who I am, my relationship as a trader with the market, like all of it. The first one was my paradigm on how I looked at losses. Rather than being upset when the money was coming out of my account balance, when the market stopped me out, and especially those times where it comes to the pip, stops you out and then goes like the way that I was able to look at that moved away from the negative feelings that are associated with it. And I got to a place where I understood the money, even if it's not in my account right now, and I'm unable to physically see it in my trading account balance, it's still there. Like really think about this. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry between forex, crypto, stocks, futures, commodity, all these different things that we can trade. The money may not be in my account balance right now. I just got stopped out. I blew an account, whatever the situation was. Just because I cannot physically see it in my account balance right now doesn't mean it's not there. The money or the market is just holding on to it until I'm ready to receive it again. That right there changed my entire perspective on risk, on loss. It revolutionized the way that I thought about this because it allowed me to feel better. Like even when taking losses, I could take them gracefully. I could accept my mistakes. I could close out the trades. Like it was just one of those things where that specific realization changed everything.
Yeah, no, that's two big things there. Is one, kind of the realization that it's like an escrow. Like your money's kind of like, you can get it back. It's not gone. It's just not in your hands at the moment, but it's still available.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter, you just need to go fulfill your plan, and actually do it, and then you can get that and more because it's all, it's already there. It's not like
Oh, absolutely.
I'm
And
making money. We're just taking
yeah.
it.
Oh, and that's just it. We're not making money in the markets. We're taking it from the market.
It's
And
like,
sometimes we give it back. But
and
what you
that's,
give is what you get. Sometimes it takes
yep.
delayed gratification.
It's
And
it's a dynamic exchange,
yeah.
based upon long-term disciplines, is I guess how I would say it. One other thing that you just mentioned, which I think is super you might have been under like noticed, but is using your perception so that you feel better about a loss or about a trade. I think that alone, like, so powerful. Perception is a higher faculty of the mind, and you have to intentionally use this tool beyond your senses so that, okay, I can continue because I now understand this from a different way. You
Mhm.
lost, it's a loss. But as long as like you have the right angle, then it allows you to move forward without further repercussions or damage. But like you have to be able to do that. And that's
Yeah.
something that every person needs to be very intentional about. So like the fact that you created a certain perspective in your mind so that you can move on. And it's like, all right, cool. There's a bigger picture, no big deal. That's huge. And everybody here, like, you have to figure out what that is for you and how you can literally use what Zachary uses, and that's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and that's the thing. It's like you know yourself better than I do. For some of you, this is the first time you've even been able to be involved in a conversation with me. So it's like I don't know where you come from. I don't know what your beliefs are. I don't know what you think is a lot of money because what you think is a lot of money is going to be different than what I think is a lot of money. And it's like all of these different things. You really got to look at where you are right now and
Mhm.
who you are right now. And the way that I've always approached things is that I've looked for what's worked or what is working, because obviously, especially with trading, what has worked in the past isn't always going to work in the same way in the future. But I've always looked at what's working, and I've taken bits and pieces of this and that, and I've made it into my own. Because at the end of the day, you can make support and resistance work. You can make harmonics work. You can make just fibs work. You can make pure price action work. You can do whatever you want, and you
Yeah.
could make it work. The effectiveness of that, though, consistently over a period of time, at the end of the day, that's going to show more based off of who you are and where your mindset and where your attitude is at more than anything. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, because this does tie in with what I mentioned a moment ago, is that so what I want you to do right now, you don't need to interact with the chat, but really just go inside yourself for a moment and look for that feeling after I ask you this question. Do you feel uncomfortable doing nothing in the markets? Like when you've marked up your charts, you're waiting for that setup. Maybe you've even taken the trade and you're just watching the position. Does that cause you discomfort? Now, the reason why I asked you that is because there was a time where I felt guilty when I wasn't doing anything on the charts, where I would where I'd mark things up on a Sunday. I was so excited, so enthusiastic, ready to go, market open. And Monday goes by, Tuesday goes by, Wednesday goes by, still haven't found a setup.
Yeah.
And I would start to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Just like, am I just wasting my time? I haven't traded. I've invested all this time this week.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be comfortable sometimes with doing nothing in the markets. And I know that you talk a lot about this, Mike, that idea of feeling your emotions without letting them influence your actions.
Mm-hmm.
These things that get stirred up when we are just waiting for that position, waiting for the take profit to get hit, waiting for the invalidation to tell us that the trade isn't going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It can be uncomfortable. And I'd love to hear, even just your perspective on how you were able to kind of work through that. Because I know that that was something that, because of how you talk about it at various stages in your journey, I'm sure that you've had a lot of exposure and a lot of experience with that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your perspective on it as well.
I kind of, I think I approached this in different ways. One thing that I heard very recently, a take on patience is, patience really is, being patient is really just figuring out what to do in the meantime. So, okay, like you can, like, let's say you're waiting for a setup, great. If you're looking at the charts and all you're doing is waiting for the setup, it's going to feel like an eternity. But if you find what to do in between, then the time's going to go by either way, right? But if you're occupied, if you're journaling, if you're doing other things that need to be done, because you have no power over those moments anyways, it's not like you're going to market so that it gets to your zone. So that's one way to kind of cure the feeling of impatience, because that's the thing. It's a lot of people are actually really patient. They feel impatience, but they are patient because they didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider myself, I used to like, oh, I'm so impatient, but I realized that I was actually really patient. I felt impatience, and I was like, bro, I gotta get in, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, like, but I didn't actually take action on it. But I was labeling myself as impatient.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's those labels that we put on ourselves that are what actually end up making us take those actions. But to get a take on this, what I figured out that was working better for me was, instead of I actually shifted my trading approach. So instead of having to wait longer for setups, I found what I could trade that would be more frequent. So instead of taking 4-hour setups and going for swing trades, I really enjoyed being in the market, like having my attention on the market for a couple hours, taking it to almost every day. And then that kind of felt like it was better to my personality, because I got inherently, I like the adrenaline. Like my whole life, everything I've ever done has been based around like, a little bit of unknown, just something about it, makes you feel alive. And so I couldn't do that anymore with risk. That's not how this game works. So the risk factor couldn't be my hit of adrenaline. Couldn't do it that way. but the speed, the velocity in which things were happening, okay, cool. This still caters to who I am. And cool, let me take the market sometimes is in my zone for 3 seconds, but I have to be able to press the button or have a limit in place. Otherwise, like it just won't work. But that's the game that I want to play because it just flows with me. So instead of practicing patience and having to, and there's still patience because for y'all that trade indices with me, waiting, like the zone is there and you just have to wait 15 minutes, 30 minutes. It feels like a fucking lifetime. You're just like, especially when you're in a live session and you're like, all right, guys, well.
I know you got to, I know you want to look at other things, but like we're locked in right now.
It's like we drew it out. We know if it gets here, this is where I'm going to get it. And everyone's like, me too. So we're all there together. Just cool. So you just have to go through it. And so then there's the, okay, what do I do in the meantime? And that's where, as an educator, I'll go and I'll have a chart on the side so I know what's going on. And then I'll answer questions and I'll go and I make sure to do things. So the beautiful part about being an educator for me is educating is my doing something in the meantime so I don't, make a mess of it and do something I'm not supposed to because I'm occupied. And then that alert goes off, which is like, hey, we're close to our zone. All right, let's refocus our attention. So that's kind of how I guess, worked around patience and in terms of like, what do I do or what do I don't do? But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, we have to understand that we haven't had a emotional intelligence course our whole lives. We just never, most people, I can't speak for everybody, but I've yet to meet a person that was trained in the art of emotional intelligence outside people in monasteries. So it's like, cool, I didn't get 20 plus years of practice in this.
This is the first time.
Great. Let me just start to figure this out when there's all of this money on the line. This is all right. So yeah, so I think understanding that this is maybe where you're at now. You might be great at the technicals, and we both have gotten into this point where everyone will get to the moment where the technicals feel good. You feel like I understand how the market's moving. Generally, I'm directionally I'm good. Exits, entries. Okay, now what? And then that's the knowing doing that. So it's the being able to feel something and actually just not do it and choose the thing that is according to the plan prior to the emotions. And it's just getting better at that. That's ultimately like how you get closer to the theory of what you're supposed to be making.
Oh,
so
100%.
That's kind of my approach.
100%. And the beauty about the markets, in my opinion, is that you can find that contrast of that same level of adrenaline and excitement and everything that you were just describing with getting in on those super small time frames. You can experience that without using the small time frames as well. It feels so, and I know that you know this, but I just, again, I want to kind of give contrast to some of the new individuals here, because it's like, you might not feel aligned, or you might not even know how to make it work given your current lifestyle. And maybe your job has a conflict with the timing, or you've got kids, or whatever your circumstances might be. It can be just as fulfilling to mark up a chart, find a nice area on an hourly or a 4-hour chart, set your limit order in, put your stop, put your TP, go throughout your entire day, maybe even have a trading view alert or whatever set up. And it's just like, all right, it hit your entry, hits your TP, play it out over the span of a day and a half, 2 days, 3 days, however long. That can be just as fulfilling. And so that's the beautiful part. You really do get to make this your own. You have the power to choose.
Yeah.
But it does start with you. Just like how Mike said, he had to go through his process of figuring out, well, this is my personality, and I actually do better approaching it like this. You've also got to go through that self-discovery process. And that's really what this conversation is about. It's discovering your strategy. What we do works across every time frame. It's not a question of, can Mike trade based off of a daily chart or a 4-hour chart, or can Zachary trade off of a 5-minute time frame? It's not about that. It's about discovering, based on who you are, what's going to make the most sense for you. Because at
For
the end of
sure.
the day, there's more than enough. There's more than enough setups every single week. There's more than enough things that we can trade. So once you get intentional about how you're going to interact with these markets that we have, that's going to change everything. But you got to find what works for you.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's like a different type of freedom, like I think, and that's for me why I do this. I'm sure it's part of the reason why I do this, at least, if not the reason. So it's like you either have the choice of being highly focused at something for a couple hours, or you have the choice of having a very passive approach and you just let it do. It's like an app running it's literally an app running in the background, and you're just like, oh yeah, it's just there, it's just doing its thing.
Yeah.
I'm living my life, but it's just doing its thing, which I think is amazing. And that was the first like 6 years of mine. The first like 4 years was kind of like that for me. And then based on the structure of my life, I needed a change, and I was like, I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful I found indices, bro.
Hey, I mean, I like to get in there too.
Yeah.
I look forward to every market open,
Mhm.
even if I don't plan on trading that day. I got to
Yeah.
see how the market's open.
Was cooking over here. Was cooking. No, for real. I think in terms of the mindset of shifting approaches, whether it's exits, entries, whatever it might be, I think we really did some pretty good work on just understanding when changes are required. Actually, we'll do this because I didn't even see what time it was. But the last thing I want to I think we can end off with this is, how do you know for you, how did you make the decision where you made a change in your trading style plan? So maybe not your style or approach, but just little changes, what it was required for you, so that it was like, okay, you know what, now I'm willing to let go of this in order to do that. Like, when was it where you basically realized, okay, it's not that I'm not getting results with this, it's just that based on data, it's time to move forward on something else. Like, well, how do
Yeah.
you approach that?
I mean, I'm a very data oriented person. I like to look at the results, because you can talk, you can theorize, but at the end of the day, you need data, you need results, in my opinion, to make decisions, especially when it comes to your money and when it comes to the markets. So the approach that I've taken, it's from Mark Douglas. May he rest in peace. In my opinion, one of the greatest trading psychology mentors that I've had the pleasure of learning from to this day.
Facts.
But he explains this concept of sample sizes, is what he
Yeah.
refers to it as. And so for those of you that are wondering, like, well, what even is that? What does that mean? I want you to think about it like this. Sometimes you might be doing the right thing, but in the short term, the results don't look like that. And so you could be on the path to progress. You could be literally doing exactly what you need to do right now to see significant improvement in your results, in your confidence, in everything. But you may not give yourself enough time to experience that. So by taking this approach of looking at things through sample sizes, the way that I was able to measure my progress was first and foremost through tracking the data. But secondly, choosing to give myself enough trades to even have data to work with to identify whether I needed to change something or whether I needed to continue doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Now, that might change based off of who you are, how you trade. When I was trading based off of smaller time frames, and kind of adopting my strategy of just getting in, getting out, there would be weeks where I might have taken like 50, 60, maybe even more trades, just adding up all the positions. And so it's like at that time, for every 100 trades that I would take, I had to kind of evaluate and be like, okay, is this working? What's not working? Do I need to give myself some more time to have some more data and go from there? Now, every 25 trades or so, I evaluate what's going well, what's not going well. Do I need to change something? Do I need to perhaps make small tweaks? Because even till this day, I'm always looking for ways to get better. And it's not so much about changing the strategy or changing the way that I'm doing things. No, it's about analyzing the data, because sometimes it's not even anything related to what you're doing on the charts. My journaling, it goes so much further than just, this is my entry, this is my stop, and I love what you created, Mike, with the with the My Trading Desk, because a lot of the things that I was already doing, it's like you wrapped that in there and more, with the diving into the emotional side of things and diving into just how it relates to other areas of your life. Because what you may find is that you might be going through a period right now where you're losing. On the technical side, your entries could be great. Your stops could be great. Your risk reward could be amazing. But there might be something going on in another area of your life that's affecting you to take trades and make certain decisions on the charts that you might not even be aware of. So track your data. That's what made the difference for me. Tracking the data, looking for patterns, and being able to work with it as it comes. And sometimes you just need a little bit more time. But with enough data, you're going to be able to analyze whether it's working out or not.
Love it. I think that's the key, guys. So sample size, give yourself enough time and data, a little fluidity. It just kind of depends on how much you're trading to, the frequency of it, and look at it for as many angles as possible. But yeah, I hope you guys, use this for the future. Reference this in terms of how you're approaching your strategy. Is it time for a change? Maybe the whole thing doesn't need to change, but just bits and pieces. Maybe it has nothing to do with the technicals anymore, and it's got to do with certain belief systems, expectations, levels of discipline. And so, with that being said, guys, if you are going to Europe, you'll see Zachary and myself there. And if you guys are in the US, we are currently hosting a cross-country tour doing live analysis. If you're in Chicago, California, Phoenix, Dallas, and Miami, we will be doing live analysis for New York Open from the 25th of August to the 5th of September. So anyways, guys, we'll see you there. Don't miss it. If you need more information on that, just check out the links in any bio and anywhere. But Zachary, bro, thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you, man. This was amazing, bro. I had just a blast. And I think being able to go back and forth on certain concepts that maybe we have lived, but kind of to relive them. I feel like for me, I always get just good reminders. I'm like, okay, cool. Just some things that like fill the soul a little bit, keep the blade sharp. So I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate you as well. And for everybody that joined us here today, thank you for being here with us. Remember, whether your results are red or blue, they're a reflection of you. Have a phenomenal rest of your day.
That was good, guys. Go show Zachary some love at Trading Coach. Go follow him wherever he is, because he's everywhere. And make sure you're getting some value from him. And if you're not seeing his live streams,